Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show here on The Real News. I'm Marc Steiner. It's great to have you with us. And welcome to another episode of Not in Our Name. Today we talk with Nir Avishai Cohen, who hails from Moshav Al-Magor in Israel. He was a major in the IDF, which is the Israeli army. He's a political activist, human rights activist. He used to be a spokesman for Breaking the Silence, who we've had on this program before, and joins us here to talk about his book, about his life and work. The interesting title as well, Love Israel, Support Palestine, an Israeli Story. And Nir, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me here. Pleasure.
So let's begin. This is an interesting, to me it was a really interesting tale, a really interesting story and well written, but interesting because it's a sojourn that you don't often hear about in this day, which is a sojourn of someone who is on the left in Israel, who's been an activist, also a major in the Israeli army, and speaks kind of deeply about the pain of having to be in the army against Palestinians, at the same time wanting to defend your country, and all the contradictions that exist. I mean, this seems to me what you're doing is kind of peeling the onion, in the sense of peeling the onion of the contradictions and the pain that Israel-Palestine faces.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for me first to say, as you mentioned, I'm an Israeli. I'm an Israeli who basically loves his country. And that's how I was raised, that we need to love our country, we need to protect our country. That's the basic values that I was educated back in my parents' house. And actually, that's also the reason why I went to serve in the army, and not just because it's one of the legal duties, because I really believe that I'm going to protect my country. And quite fast, I figured out this is not what I'm doing. As soon as I arrived to the occupied territories, I understood the picture is different than I thought. Maybe I'll speak a little bit about that later on, but I think this story, I mean, this book, indeed it's about my life, mainly about my experiences in the West Bank, but it's also about the lives of many other Israelis. The Hebrew name of the book is How I Became This Way. So in many ways, I'm asking how we became this way. And I think the book also gives quite maybe unique perspective out of an eyes of an Israeli, an officer, which I still actually served in the army till a month ago. I think that belongs to another topic, which these days what's going on in Israel. But I really do love Israel as the title of the book, but I really do support Palestine.
So interesting that the title of the book is how did we get here? Is that what it is in Hebrew? Is that what you said?
No, how I became this way.
How it became this way. So let me kind of talk about that for a minute with you. I think that's a much better title. How did we get this way? It really is. I mean, so you come from a semi-collective place, a moshav. Your parents, the history of their family is surviving the Holocaust.
Correct. My grandma survived Auschwitz after lost all her family over there.
And your mother and father are both on the left, and your mother seems to be really on the left, from what you wrote.
Both of them. Both of them are in the left in Israel, definitely.
So let's take the title as you wrote it, and it makes me think of 50 years ago, I wrote a poem called Growing Up Jewish. And one of the lines in that poem was, the pain of Israel-Palestine is refugees creating refugees, and all the contradictions that talks about. So talk a bit about that. I mean, that in terms of your book and your life, and the struggle you went through to come to grips with what's really happening with Israel and Palestine.
My grandma, the one that survived Auschwitz, she was a religious person. And even though she was religious, she said that our most important holiday is the Independence Day, because and that was her main lesson, maybe from the Holocaust, that we need to have our own country. But then, while saying that, I do think that we shouldn't occupy other people. And I mean, when I recruited to the army, I suddenly understood this conflict between the duty of protecting the country and then the other end, the unnecessary daily routine, the occupation that's going on in the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
I mean, and the book also, to me, is one of the kind of most important themes throughout the book is how you wrestled with being in the army for so many years and in the face of the occupation and having to be part of that, even though you saw the contradictions, and that, I mean, having to go through that for how many years now? 20 plus years or more?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you talk a bit about how you go through that and get through that, given the belief system that you have?
Yeah, so I started in the army back in 99 when I turned 18, like many other Israelis. And after a few months, in September of 2000, I arrived first time to the occupied territories. It was in Gaza Strip, and day later on I arrived to the West Bank, and I served there as a platoon commander for more than half a year. And in my book, most of the experiences from this time. Later on, while I was deputy of a company commander during 2 stints of reserve army, I also served in the West Bank. I must say that in the beginning, I mean, it was a process for me to understand that I'm not willing to serve in the West Bank. And then only in 2010, around that year, 10 years after, 10 years of serving in the West Bank, I decided that in one hand, I will keep serve in the army, but then in the other hand, I'm not willing to serve in the occupied territories. Fortunately, I had the chance to do that because my battalion was sent in front line to the border with Egypt and Jordan. But definitely I can see that it was a process. I needed to understand it with myself, and it's a process that took years, I admit, to understand, that I'm not willing to serve in the West Bank.
There's 2 parts of the book here I kind of want to talk just about in terms of the struggle that you went through. I'm going to read this piece that you wrote about your own feelings about the word Zionist and being an Israeli. You wrote, I can love this country, be invested in its existence, and even be willing to die defending its borders without being called a Zionist. I'm an Israeli by national identity. And then you talked about, in another piece of the book, because you're an athlete, running across a marathon finishing line, carrying both an Israeli and a Palestinian flag.
Yes, it was an Ironman, but yeah.
An Ironman. I'm sorry, an Ironman. Excuse me, an Ironman. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to belittle you down to a marathon, brother. I'm sorry. But
yeah. Again, I think it's a very wide topic about what is Zionism these days. But definitely, as I see it these days in Israel, Zionism or being a Zionist, first meaning is the supremacy of the Jews on the Muslims or the Arabs in the state of Israel and obviously in the occupied territories. And I don't feel supreme of anyone, and I don't want to feel like that. That's why I decided not to have this definition as a Zionist, but I really can define myself a person that loves his country, and I think that my 24 years serving in the army kind of proved that. But still, the fact that I love my country doesn't mean I cannot criticize it, and doesn't mean even the opposite. I think if you love your country, if you love Israel, you should criticize the occupation. If you want Israel to trying to be a democracy, you should demand the end of the occupation. You should, by the name of democratic values. That's what I'm doing.
I'm going to come back to how that might happen. But one of the things that I want you to describe for us, the people listening to us, is that you went through a lot and different organizations in your fight to kind of figure out how you best fight politically and socially for a different kind of future for Palestinians and Israelis living there together. But let's talk for a moment about Meretz and describe what that party is in Israel and your work for them, and the state of the Israeli left in the Knesset, and why you were done, why you said enough with Meretz. Talk a bit about that part of your struggle.
Yeah. First, I unfortunately I must say that the left in Israel is kind of dying. Okay, it's not in his best days, and I think the situation of Meretz party just proved that. I was part of Meretz party. I was a consultant to a parliament member, to a Knesset member back in 2017 and 18. But I think Meretz, like many other Israelis, or maybe it's a reflection of the movement that's going on in Israel, instead of keep raising the flag of anti-occupation by the name of loving this country, Meretz changed the maybe a way, and decided to put away all the anti-occupation struggle. And when I realized that this is the direction, I just understood I cannot be in this kind of party. So I think this is the main reason why I left Meretz. And I must say that I'm not sad that Meretz is now not in the parliament, because I really do believe now there is a time and a space to a new party. Also, I speak about it in my book, Jewish Arabic Party, which will represent much better the Israeli left public.
Let's explore that for a minute. I was really curious. It's towards the end of your book, you really do talk about that as what you think should be the future. And I'm curious how you think you get there. I was talking with a friend the other night, who's a colleague who's Israeli. He lives in Germany, and one of the things we talked about was that close to 6% or more of the Israeli population has left Israel, the Jewish population, and many of those who left were on the left. Not all, but many. And so how do you build what you think? How do you build what you would like to see in Israel, Palestine? How do you think that happens? And why do you think the left just fell apart?
The left fell apart. That's a great question. I think it's a process that going on for about 20 years, unfortunately. I think the main reason is the huge success of the settlers movement that managed to convince not just the right side of Israel, also the central group or the central camp in Israel, that there is no partner with the Palestinians, there is no hope for peace. And then also, I think the left, and also talk about it in my book, kind of I don't know if doesn't know or forget how to speak with youngsters. We as the left camp lost maybe a whole generation of youngsters. We saw that lately in the elections, with the huge numbers of youngsters that voted to Ben Gvir and to Smotrich. Unfortunately, the agendas of the left in Israel is not very popular among youngsters. And that was one of my main reasons why I decided to write my book, and I did it in a very, I can say, simple language, because I wanted that the book will be written by much youngsters I can.
So let's talk a bit about that particular thing. You do write about that extensively, and as part of your book, you write about young people and how they're kind of disconnected. And I'm curious how you think like in much of the world, the young, a huge portion of the young are on the left, and just recently in Israel there were these massive demonstrations against the right wing government. So where do you think that goes? How do you think you begin to organize what you think should happen? You talked in your book about a Jewish Arab party. You talk an Israeli Palestinian party that could come together, and you talk about the kind of dislocation of young people. So how do you think you get beyond that? How do you think you organize that?
Definitely, if I knew the perfect answer for that, maybe the situation of the left among youngsters was better, yeah. But I can say that we need first to understand what or where those youngsters are at right now, meaning in social works, also in prime time. I can speak by myself. I went to a reality show which I was considered as trash, because I wanted to speak among occupation. I wanted to speak on occupation in that reality show. I'm talking about the Big Brother,
right?
And I think we saw the result of it. I mean, I cannot say that I changed the political map in Israel. Yeah, obviously not. But I can do say that many youngsters didn't even know what is breaking the silence is, and because of this reality show, they for once understood that it's like an important organization. They got quite a lot of supporters, new supporters after the reality show. So that's just an example. I can give you another example what I'm doing, which again, it's like a really small contribution, but it's something. I'm every year go to dozens of pre-academy cadets. They invite me to speak with them about the occupation. I do it voluntarily. I'm like going all over the country, talking with those young guys that just about to serve in the army about my experiences. So I mean, I think we need to work hard, and we need to speak in the language of the youngsters. Because on the other side of the map, of the political map, they're doing it very well, we have to admit.
Well, they're doing it well, and also there's been this huge growth, as you write about. What do you call them in the book? The Messianic settlement approach. But that's huge. I mean, that the super religious Israelis have a huge amount of power, more than they had when I was young. But it's a huge amount of power. I mean, something really shifted when I was a kid, and I'm older than you. So when I was a kid in the 50s, the Orthodox Jewish political power was there and did have an influence, but it wasn't as massive as it is now. And this influx of many American Orthodox Jews into Israel and into the West Bank, I think, is part of that.
And I think the Americans need to understand that Israel has changed. Correct. Israel is not the democratic state it used to be. And definitely it's different than in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It's a different state. Unfortunately, it's a country that in part of its regime has an apartheid regime. I mean, this is the truth, and we cannot avoid it. And everyone needs to understand it.
You know, I years ago, I also covered what was going on in South Africa when the apartheid was falling apart. And there was a minority of white people, many of them who were Jews, in South Africa who fought against apartheid. And so your kind of push that you write about in your book is the push of a minority inside of Israel itself. So I want to talk about how you kind of thought about your own history and how you end the book in talking about your vision of a Jewish Arab party and how you see that coming about and what it takes to make that happen at this moment in history.
Look, I'm not very optimistic for the coming or for the near future. I have to admit. There are several tryings of establishing new parties. In few of them, I'm taking part, but it's very, very, very difficult. There is one party called that is actually exists called Kol Ezrachea. It's led by Avrum Burg, who was parliament member. He's a very well-known character in Israel. But we are facing huge barriers and huge difficulties. But that's the direction that we need to go. We have no choice. I mean, I really do believe that the future of democratic country is in this kind of party. But this is just the seeds, and it will take, as I see it, a long time to those seeds to grow and to be a real plant.
So a couple of things while we have time together. I want to go back to the kind of heart of the book for me before we conclude. But for me, part of the heart of the book was your own personal struggles as a young Israeli in the army, leading men, in part guarding the borders, but in part being part of the occupation. And there was clearly pieces of it where you became very emotional about what you were doing, the contradictions that you faced. Just talk a bit about how you lived through that, how you persevered through that, what it did to you.
Definitely the experiences in my personal experiences in the West Bank affected my whole life till this day, and I'm sure it will keep affecting my last day here. I think that unlike most of the Israelis and unlike definitely rest of the world, I saw by my eyes what's going on, boots on the ground. And with these experiences, I understood that I need to do something. And again, I'm not doing enough, and even I'm not doing much, but I'm doing something. I can give as example that my testimony that I gave to Breaking the Silence, or even the year that I was working there. But I think the most important thing, or the first step to end the occupation, is that the people will really understand what's going on over there, on the daily routine, every day, also today. And Israel and the Israeli government and the Israeli Hasbara is very good of hiding it. And I'm a part of a group that's trying to show another angle. And I can say that we are trying to show the real reality that's going on till today in the West Bank.
So let me take a quick digression before we come to a conclusion. Just to describe to our listeners what Breaking the Silence is, and why you joined them, and what your role was. I want people to understand that.
So Breaking the Silence is an organization of veteran soldiers who served in the occupied territories from the year 2000. And actually, the goal of this organization is to tell the Israeli public and also the rest of the world what is really happening in the occupied territories out of, again, the eyes of the soldiers who were there. And this organization doing it mainly with testimonies of soldiers and officers like me, and also with tools that they are making in the West Bank. Yeah, so that's Breaking the Silence, one of the most important anti-occupation organizations that existing in Israel these days.
It reminded me of reading that part. Reminded me of a group that we had back in the 1960s here, the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. It became one of the most effective organizations of people fighting against the Vietnam War to end the Vietnam War, were the men coming back from that war to say no, which is what you're talking about trying to build in Israel through breaking the silence.
Correct. The thing is that in the poison environment in Israel in the last 20 years, myself and people like me, in many places in Israel, we are like, we became like traitors because of the poison's propaganda against us. I think unlike what happened back in the 60s and 70s in the States.
I'll tell you a funny story before I ask your last question here. When you said that, it also happens here. This was in 1971. I was part of Shalom Achshav. For people who don't know, it was Peace Now. I was friends of,
Yeah.
and I was in a debate with a Zionist, a conservative Zionist, on a stage, and he called me a Juden Rot. And my response to him, and we can bleep the language, I looked over at him on the podium in front of the audience and I said, "What the fuck did you say?" And he said it again, and I went over and knocked him out. I'm not talking anymore. I'm done. I mean, with that, so the intensity, I'm saying that because just because of the intensity of the situation, the intensity of the divide inside the Jewish world is really profound when it comes to the future. I mean, I can see among a lot of younger Jews in America the opposite of what you see among younger Jews in Israel, which is that people are beginning to question what's going on.
And I think it's very important that those youngsters will demand from the American government to understand that it has to oppose the occupation because of the relations the state has with Israel. I think this is like maybe the next step that we need to get in.
So one of the things that you write about in the book, and I'd like to conclude with this, and if you want to read part of the book after this, that's fine. And before we go, and you write this about the settlements in the West Bank, and this is really important, I think. And I'll just read it here. And these are your words from your book on page 158. As I've mentioned before, the settlements are doing the exact opposite. They're endangering the state of Israel. And furthermore, the settlers are endangering IDF soldiers. Our military and civilian cemeteries are full of soldiers and civilians who died at the altar of this lie. As long as the settlements exist, we cannot form a clear border between us and Palestinians, thus it's impossible to allow security forces to properly defend against blah, blah, blah. You went on. But it's so the question is, and that is really critical. So that how do you see political forces in Israel developing that actually can confront that reality? Do you see it happening?
As I said before, I don't see it happening in the coming or in the nearest future, but I really do believe that maybe in few years, maybe with the help of the world, that maybe we'll hold some sanctions against Israel. I think the Israelis need to understand that there is a price to occupy other people, and we have to admit that the Israelis don't really understand it, and we don't pay any price or barely any price for it. So I think it might start happen when the situation, maybe the international situation of Israel will start to change. Maybe that will be the first step that will push the mainstream or the central camp in Israel to understand what's going on in the West Bank and our duty to finish the occupation or to end the occupation.
So first of all, I want to start end this way. First of all, thank you. I mean, Nia Avishai Cohen The book in English is called Love Israel, Support Palestine, an Israeli Story. Nir was as I said earlier, was a major in the Israeli army. He's worked in many other capacities in Israel, breaking the silence, which is soldiers saying no to the occupation. And it's an important read. It's an emotional read. It's full of facts and reality. It's a story of traveling through a nation that you love and trying to change it. It reminds me in many ways of when I was a civil rights worker in the South as a kid, of the white people in the South, who stood up against segregation and said no. It's the same standing up. So Nir, I want to thank you for the book, and thank you so much for being one of the people standing up to say not in our name. Nir Avishai Cohen, I really do appreciate the book, and I encourage everybody to read it. Love Israel, support Palestine. It's really well worth the read. And thank you so much, Nir, for being with us.
First, thank you very much for hosting me. And if I may say that the book is available on Amazon, so every American can get it very easily. And I hope it will get spread just because of the message, as I see it.
I hope so too, and we will do our best to push it out there. It's well worth the read, really well written. Nir, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you very much, Mark.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation we had today with Nir Avishai Cohen, who was our guest. His book, Love Israel, Support Palestine, is really well worth the read. Again, let me say that Nir was a major in the Israeli army, in the reserves. He stood up against the occupation. He's a human rights activist and former spokesman for Breaking the Silence, which is a really important organization of former Israeli soldiers saying no to the occupation in Israel and ending that apartheid oppression. So we want to thank you once again, Nir Avishai Cohen, for joining us. Love Israel, support Palestine. And of course, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And thanks to all the folks here at The Real News that make this happen. Kelly Rivera for doing the stuff behind the scenes, making this work. Adam Coley and Cameron Grandino behind the glass. Everyone here at The Real News for making this show possible. And please let me know what you think about what you heard today, what you'd like us to cover. Just write to me at mss@therealnews.com, and I'll get right back to you. And while you're there, stay a minute. Go to www.therealnews.com/support. Become a monthly donor and become part of the future with us. So for Adam Coley, Cameron Grandino, and Kelly Rivera, and the crew here at The Real News, I'm Marc Steiner. Stay involved, keep listening, and take care.
Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.